Oh, yeah, and I can finally introduce our next speaker, Robert O'Keefe, Senior Program Manager, Globalization at Citrix, with his topic about data-driven decision-making for globalization strategy and operations. Guys, so you know, data is everywhere. We need the data, we analyze it every day, small data, big data. So this is something that becomes more and more accessible, and we have different sources of data. And Robert will tell us how they use the data to maximize the productivity of internal resources and define localization strategy at Citrix. Okay, Robert, I see you already joined us. Hello.
Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are.
Yeah, good afternoon to those who joined us from Asia. Good morning to those who joined us from Europe, and I think that attendees from Americans continent will join us soon as well. By the way, we have how many? 380 plus live attendees right now. Not bad.
That's huge. Yeah.
Very nice workplace, Robert.
Thank you very much. Yeah, this is my home office.
Good, great one. Okay, so are you ready to share the screen and start the presentation?
1 second to click the button.
Okay, so just to remind to our attendees that we have this Q&A tab to leave your questions, and I keep monitoring the Zoom chat. So if you have good feedback, I will please to share it with Robert. Okay, so I'm stopping my video and muting myself and leave it to you. Enjoy.
Thank you very much. Go ahead. Okay, you see my screen?
Not yet.
No.
Please try again. Oh, we have a from Egypt.
That button, sorry, my fault.
Ah, okay, good. Here you go.
Let's do it. So I'm more used to GoToMeeting on Citrix, you know, so. Okay, here we go. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can.
Good stuff. Excellent. Okay, let's crack on. So, well, good morning. You know, my name is Robert O'Keefe. I'm the program manager here in Citrix, and you know, Citrix as a company has been going a fair while. And I was actually here in the earlier days around the time of remote access, where we had really just a single product solution, Metaframe at the time, which provided remote access to for employees to do work on any device really. And then of course we moved forward in time and also increased in pace, acquiring a number of technologies in sort of 2010 to 2015 era. And in fact that pace of change has increased with technology as well over time. And so now the portfolio is much larger in terms of size and what we need to do as a group. So workspace intelligence, where we are today, is really made of 3 areas. You've got workspace, providing the end user access and management functions. And you've got networking, which allows us to deliver it securely, and then analytics, which kind of takes it to another level with AI, machine learning, to provide that extra level of management. And Citrix Workspace, as I said, is all about accessing apps, desktops, and files using any one of a number of devices. And those, on the management infrastructure side, those apps and files can be provided from really any sort of storage medium, whether it's on-premise, hybrid, cloud, SaaS app, on-premise app, and so forth. So it's really a comprehensive solution now, and it's delivered securely over the network. But the company's vision really is to reach 1 billion users around the globe using our Citrix Workspace product, which I'd like to call out here because this is really our main area in terms of globalization services, is end user facing software. And as a globalization group, we're actually sitting within the engineering arm of the company. And we have resources dotted around the globe where we have a localization department made of translation services and engineering. And they work primarily on, the localization product, automation of that workflow. A lot of the kind of stuff that, Taylor was talking about with API connectivity. And then we have a globalization QA group, and they really work on the functional and localization testing with, automation and tools which we build in-house as well. And with the increase in the number of products and the frequency of release of products, that team has really had to sort of up their game in the last 5 to 10 years. And lastly, but not least, globalization development, who do the architecture and development education as well as consultation. And their role really is around making sure that our product is international ready. And then there's myself in portfolio management, and I sort of sit in the middle with these groups and have an interest in all. So I'd like to go back a little bit in time, before I go down the data journey, to talk about, where we came from and how it all began and so forth. In the early days, we were moving files around manually and sort of quite heavy processes. And as I said, we acquired a lot of companies throughout sort of the early teens of 2000. And this forced us to really look at our internal processes. And so we went down the route of Lean Six Sigma, where we looked at our processes, removed all the waste and over-processing, if you like, tried to reduce defects or prevent defects as much as possible by, left shifting and this kind of work. And, the interesting thing about this whole Lean Six Sigma study and implementation was not only did it save us, well over 2% in terms of operating expense, but it changed our culture and our mindset and allowed conversations to take place like, this may not be the best way to do it, there's a more efficient way, because it goes back to this lean thinking and the way of improving process and efficiency. And Lean Six Sigma really got us to a healthy place. But what we found as well, a bit later down the road, engineering teams overall in Citrix, I think we had a dependency on third-party vendors for quality assurance. And there was a company drive to try and reduce the dependency on third-party vendors and to try and get a lot of this in-house. And as well, it came with the sort of the real, the large shift forward in automation of testing and QA and so forth. And so we were challenged to bring in, to lessen our dependency on vendors, increase our automation, which is kind of like a big shift in the company. And on top of that, really, we need to decide, okay, well, where do we focus first? If we're going to build automation, where do we do it first? In what product line? What's our language focus and so forth? And so we started to answer the big questions like, what's the relative value of each product line? Which one do we do first? What are our major languages and regions? Which language or languages should we focus on first? The sort of tiers, as it were. And then where are we spending our time and localization dollars in relation to what's important? And so we actually started down the return on investment route, measuring our, where we're making money, as I said, the major regions. So I accessed finance at the time. This is back in 2014-15, and we started gathering financial data from it broken down by region, really, Germany, France, Spain, so forth, and then also by product line. So you need to have a workspace split, an analytics split, a networking split, and so forth. And that allowed us to build quite a comprehensive picture of which regions were doing well in what product line and so forth. On top of that, we started measuring our internal costs. So the internal resources, fully burdened costs, translation spend, tooling licenses, the international QA, which we would spread across the different languages. So there's like an even spread of internationalization, if you like. And then where our time is spread, so allocate innovation to a separate category to product and so forth. But in the past, as I mentioned, it was like a separate box, MetaFrame, single product line. It used to be a physical box, off-the-shelf product, single binary, one language, one SKU or stock keeping unit, which we'd ship off to Japan, and we could track the sales of Japanese product or French product or Spanish product in that way. So it was very easy to get localized value back in the past. And they went down the route of multilingual binary, one SKU, all the languages, downloadable from the web. Now it gets a lot harder to track where we're making money, because we don't really know from a SKU perspective where that revenue is coming from. And so with the study on the revenue and our costs, we had a kind of a good picture on where we're making money around the world. So in region 1, we make that much money, in region 2, region 3, and so forth. We'd have different tiers, so the most important region, tier 2 regions, tier 3 regions. But it really left us with one big problem, and that we didn't really know within a given region which percentage were using localized product and which were still using English, because that was still challenging for us. So then we started down the sort of telemetry route, gathering data from apps running on a device. So, for example, the Workspace app client that you see in the first one there, when it's running on a Windows device which is French, it uploads the locale to the back-end system, and so shows it running on a French system. And of course, it's showing the operating system language, so it could be installed on any operating system. We get the results of the locales on which the client is running. And so we started small. We started with the Windows client, and we started with this main server component, which I think was Studio at the time. And what we realized is it takes a fair bit of effort to build it out across all the platforms, but one needs to, because what we also found by going down that route is that there are variations between regions. America tends to use iOS, it's very popular, but in like Italy, France, Android is much more popular than iOS. So, and in the UK, it's about a 50-50 split. So what we found is you need to take both platforms to really get an idea of the mobile usage, and you have to apply that to all the different platforms and so forth. And then we track the administration consoles usage, and importantly, in more recent times, we've started tracking the Citrix product documentation, which I'll talk about a little bit later. So now we had revenue impact, the usage, and we can say within a given region where there's this much usage, and therefore the value of a given language is that much. And so we're able to really quantify how much impact we're having with localized product. And this is a really powerful message, because it allows you to say, okay, well, we're doing really well in this region, let's keep going. But it also allows you to steer conversations and influence product management and say, okay, well, that region there, you want that new language, but let's think about that a bit more, because we need a bit more business case to do that. And so it's good information to have. But of course, like anything, 2 dots in a graph, I was told by someone very wise, 2 dots in a graph does not make a trend. So this is a process that one needs to repeat year on year, quarter on quarter, measure the revenue, measure the internal usage of internal spend, and then really get that trend year over year. But this really helps, because especially in a per product line, you may want to grow a product line, you look at the regions which are growing, and you'll look to serve those regions. And so this is a way to really drive adoption of Workspace I was talking about earlier. When I'm speaking with product managers, I try and bring in other information as well, like our competitor offerings, direct competitor, or just industry data in general. This is all pretty useful to compare. And other elements of information like the English Proficiency Index by Education First, where they measure the spend on education in the country, particularly in English language, other earnings per capita, this kind of internet connectivity, and also tests, of course. They categorize countries accordingly. This data is kind of like, you can use it, to steer a conversation. Use it. Anything on the right is in need of localization. Anything on the left, you get less bang for the buck, but it's still needed. Germans still prefer their products in German, so you've got to steer it that way as well. And this is kind of like the ROI studies sort of driving that side of things. But our development team at the same time started looking at technology. So we had a lot of customer cases which had escalated over time. So we had 38,000 in the database, impossible to mine, by a human resource. And so they started looking at AI or machine learning to actually recognize which of those cases, or the 38,000 cases, were related to globalization or some sort of problem with the international product. And then once they'd refined the algorithm, tried out a few machine learning engines, figured out which ones worked and which ones didn't, they started to build out the accuracy, and they've got it from what, to 60% in 2017 to I think around about 80+% in 2020. So it's pretty accurate, and the really meaningful data is they've been able to categorize what types of issues are in what product. So the products are in the columns at the bottom, and the types of issues seen in the pie chart. And we recognize, with this, with a virtualized desktop accessing, some server. My desktop is in Amsterdam, and I'm accessing it using, this keyboard. But this keyboard's virtualized, and of course, when you start switching languages and keyboards, it all gets very interesting when it's virtualized. So the generic client input method editor serves the Far East to improve their experience, and the keyboard layout and language bar helps customers to sort of change the layout, it all syncs dynamically. So there are features which have come out of this study, in fact, and there's actually a blog on the web which talks about analyzing, the machine learning data and how they did it. Should that take your interest? But it's a fascinating story, and it has also made our test cases more robust as well, as we recognize which ones slip through the cracks, and we can improve that for future. But it would be remiss of me not to talk about how documentation data really transformed our approach to Citrix documentation, product documentation. The translation services team and the local engineering team, localization engineering team, they teamed up, and we recognized that 20% of our customers were using non-English content, but only 40% of the content was translated. So it's only 40% of our English docs were translated. And we found that the customer journey was getting broken. You'd be reading a piece of translated document, and they'd link to another document which didn't exist, and it would break. And so not only was it broken, but they weren't being served with the complete documentation set. So there was a big need to improve this area, and machine translation, or really the sort of advent of neural MT and an improvement in quality, really allowed us to explore that area. And so in 2018, we started this journey. And in 2020, we delivered 100% of our documentation is now localized. 40% remains on machine translation plus post-editing. And 60% is machine translation with some controls, like terminology is aligned, ensure that we've got the branding right, and a few automated corrections, but barely any editing. And that's for German, Japanese, French, Spanish, and simplified Chinese. So all of our supported languages, in fact. And really, this is how it looks when you go to the web, So when you go to docs.citrix.com, the language selector on the right there shows a machine translated language denoted by this little icon. And you click on French, it just appears in French. But in addition to the regular page, you get a banner at the top allowing you to send comments back or feedback to help improve the translation. And this is stored on our back end, so we can take remedial action. We can review a page, improve it, and make sure that that's persisted for the next time. It's not freshly machine translated all the time. It's machine translated and then persisted. And then we also provide the user with two important pieces of information. So we advertise that the article is machine translated, provide them the cause, the non-disclosure, the legal text at the bottom saying, please don't sue us if it's any incorrect text. And we provide them with a button to turn it back to English. So they can go back to the English version. And in addition to that, if they hover over the text, the English text will pop up. So they get this hover over functionality to allow them to check back to the English if needed. But the data story is really interesting. Now, translation data is so big, we have a full-time resource working on this. And we decided to start measuring. Data initiated it, but data also measures the success of this particular initiative. So we're seeing that whether the document is, this example in Spanish here, and we're seeing that if the document is human translated and MTP, or whether it's MT only, we're seeing good readership throughout. Also, remember, we're capturing the feedback, and we've not seen many negative feedbacks at all. We've seen, you know, a lot of comments, some different, but not many which are bad. Shows we're on track. Furthermore, we're measuring the actual adoption. Do you remember I said 2 dots on the graph that does not really equate to trend? So we're trying to gather trend information on MT adoption. So we tracked it in, I think it was January, February, it was launched, but then we didn't really announce it until around the sort of, you know, later in the year time frame, when we saw a peak in the actual readership. So the sort of public announcement via our blog system went live, and we saw an upturn in the usage quite dramatically. And it's really proving to be quite a successful story, the machine translated content. There are the challenges which still remain. So, you know, we are working on improving the workflow, making it faster, removing the errors that I spoke about, you know, those errors that can creep in, trying to make the whole process more robust, looking at new technologies which allow us to statistically measure the quality of translation of content to be translated, suitability of the English. And so this presentation really is about data-driven decision-making. Data really drives globalization services in Citrix and allows us to make decisions which we believe will add value to the customer. And as I said, you know, the data-driven decisions where we've kind of used data to support the argument has really been along the lines of Dutch, Italian, Brazilian, Portuguese, now available in Workspace app with intelligence. The keyboard, IME, and language bar is now out there, and there are more enhancements planned for 2020. And we have 100% of our documentation now in those languages, but being machine translation, once we make improvements, you know, in the actual workflow, there's no stopping us. I believe we can go. This is just the beginning of our journey, I believe. And so that's kind of where we are today with with data within Citrix and all we've done. So I'd be interested to hear of your data stories and you know, what you've learned from data in your company. Thank you very much.
Robert, thank you very much for the presentation. You really brought a very important topic, and now we have a lot to think about. Thank you very much. Robert, can you please stop sharing the screen so that attendees can see us and we can start this Q&A session? I will help you with the questions. We already have several of them. So let's start. So the first question is from Hanan Sharaf. Where can I get the data on English proficiency level by country?
If you search EFI English proficiency, Education First is the group that do it. It's out there on the web. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, good. Thank you. So let's take a look on another question from M. Soltis. Did you run market tests between the localized and non-localized offerings to help determine the impact was because of localization and not another factor?
No, we didn't do that from the engineering group, but we worked with the marketing team, sales teams, to identify whether there was a need for localization in the region. And so we gained feedback from those teams before we went ahead with the decision. It really is, you know, you can't just, you can use data to support a decision like this, you know, to add new products, add new languages, but you need everyone to work together, the marketing teams, sales teams, so forth. They all need to support the decision. And it needs to be there as well in terms of pipeline revenue and this kind of stuff. So yeah, there's more to it than just data. There is a conversation or three to be had here.
Okay. So the third question is coming from Cristina Trevino Castillo. Are you including localized documentation in your ROI model? If so, are there any insights you can share on how those perform with regards to ROI? Thanks.
Really interesting question. At the moment, we do incorporate documentation usage into our ROI model. So we, I may not mention it, but we take an average of the, you know, sort of the user interface, docs, admin consoles and form the ROI that way. So yes, it does take it into account, but indirectly. More importantly, I think, is that we have, as a company, heard from customers that they need localized content, but it's always been very hard to justify it because the costs involved to translate such large volumes. So we've been stuck until we came up with this plan to machine translate in a big way.
Got it. Okay, so let's take a look on the question from Malik Ahmed Erol. Does the machine translated content website meet the customer information requirements of countries for products served in the specific country to provide information in the native language? Very long question. Maybe you want to look at it one more time.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the Q&A, the first on top.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, it's hard to say whether it meets the absolute requirements of every customer. I think the important point is to say that, you know, they had nothing before in terms of localized content, and now we're providing them with machine translated content, where we are trying to increase the quality bar all the time. So as I said, it's just really the beginning of the journey for Citrix with machine translated content. It's out there. It's of a good enough quality at the moment for us. We always want to ensure that quality remains first and foremost for the customer, and so we're looking for ways to improve that over time as we, you know, understand as new technologies evolve, really, because that's where it is. It's all moving so fast that we can't stand still. You know, you've got to sort of look at the technology, what's latest on the market, try it out, improve. You know, it's an iterative process. Yeah.
Okay. We have 3 minutes left before our break, so let's answer the rest of the questions. We have actually several of them, so we'll try to do that. The question from Nicolas Fontana. Really, Nicolas is trying to do some business development. Do you require Nordic localization at Citrix? If yes, do you collaborate with freelancers or agencies, or with both?
Who knows is the answer to that.
Okay, Nicholas, keep grinning. The question from Annalie Teenworth: do you localize the versions of English, French, Spanish, Portuguese, etc., adopting to each locale, English UK vs English US?
No. We do. I think it's fairly typical. We do English US for product documentation. So for product documentation, we do English US, Spanish international, you know, French, France, and so forth. Now, we focus on the largest markets, really. But of course, with our marketing website, for example, there are flavors, if you like, or variants of language, and they are on the web. Yeah. So in the marketing side, we customize it, yes, further.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and the question from Rebi Salem: what tip do you have on a good tool to measure statistically?
I mean, Tableau seems to be the reference, but it's also very expensive. So, you know, we started using Tableau, then we moved to Power BI, because Power BI essentially comes with Microsoft, and it's just as effective, really. Both tools require you to do, you know, some sort of, you know, learning, should we say, you know. But it's not impossible. It's achievable. Yeah. And, you know, the back-end systems can be anything from a spreadsheet to Google Analytics. You know, the source content is massive, you know, so you can pick up data from anywhere.
Yeah, many sources.
Yeah.
The question from Annalie Teenworth: what's your stand on a global English? For example, as a company, standard English version, like blog posts, global marketing campaigns, etc.
I don't think I have a strong opinion on that. I think there's always the need for local content, really, to really appeal to the customer, especially in the marketing side, the first contact and so forth. But you know, one language for all, I'm not quite sure just yet.
We have several more questions, but we are out of time. Sorry, the attendees, we will answer these questions later with Robert together. Maybe probably one last question, a casual one from Michelle. How do you combine your second job as a Red Bull engineer together with your Citrix job?
It's a tough life, yeah. I mean, we sponsor the Red Bull racing team, and I've had the good fortune of going to the actual factory where they build the cars. And I must say, it's absolutely fascinating and highly recommended.
Cool. I see you enjoyed it. Okay, Robert, thank you very much for joining us today for this great presentation. So have a good rest of the day and talk to you later.